Hello. Hi everyone. Welcome to the new episode of Pitch Perfect. Today we are joined by someone who has been shaping the future of sales and go-to-marketing strategy for over 2 decades. Jason Masciarelli leads the go-to-market efforts of Launchpad at Pega, a new business line designed to help software providers build workflow-based SaaS apps and unlock new revenue streams. Jason's career spans more than 2 decades of sales leadership. Can you believe that? It's amazing, right? From founding one of the earliest SaaS consulting firms to scaling sales organizations in the US and Asia Pacific to driving venture initiatives at Pega. What makes his perspective unique is the blend of entrepreneur, executive, and investor experiences. He brings them together to us. Having built companies from scratch, led global expansions, and guided early stage innovators. In today's conversations, we will explore Jason's leadership journey, his lessons from building sales ecosystems around the world, and his take on how AI will reshape the way we sell, we lead, and coach. And of course, we'll wrap up with a rapid fire round to hear a few fun insights from Jason beyond the boardroom. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Pramod. And you set the bar high, so I hopefully I deliver on some value for folks. So thank you.
We're really looking forward to it. So happy you are here today. So Jason, let's start with something interesting. So you've led GTM strategies for startups and global companies, right? So how does your approach to GTM shift when you're helping a $1 million startup versus $100 million scale-ups?
Sure. Yeah, great question. Very different ends of the spectrums and very different problems to solve, right? And so I think that the first thing is always finding the constraint to growth. And so in business, growth is something that's natural, and businesses that naturally want to grow, but there's constraints, and you have to look at what those constraints are. And so typically for a small startup or $1 million software company, or any kind of services business, acquisition is usually the biggest problem to start. And so, I think solving the acquisition problem is often, a first thing, because you have to get customers initially. But then often people forget that it's just as important to focus on activation of those customers, getting those customers to value, their retention, and how you expand. So I think looking at those four aspects of the business and figuring out which one is really your growth constraint, and then really focusing deeply on solving that particular problem. And then once you've solved that, then it's going to open up the next problem, right? So maybe you solve the acquisition problem, and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, look, we're not getting people to value quick enough. And so now we have to focus on how do we get people to value quickly? And then that's going to help your retention issue, for example.
Very interesting. So Jason, in this process, you've built ecosystems around alliances, ventures, and marketplaces, right? What do you see as the X factor for sales leader when it comes to building partnerships that actually drive revenue?
Sure. Yeah. So one of my first companies, I started off in the Salesforce.com ecosystem in 2000. And at that point, Salesforce was a startup, but they were, investing heavily in sales and marketing. And, our company was a 1 or 2 person startup as well. And so the key thing for us was really, and I think, there's no one X factor for everybody, but I think there's 2 things that are important. One is giving massive value. And what I mean by that is value that's going to deliver impact both for individuals and for the businesses, for either your prospects or clients. So in an example of my business, I started with Salesforce. How we got going first and how we were successful is we were like, they're trying to build the business in North America and New England specifically, where I was based, and they needed leads. And so I had relationships. So I went and got a handful of initial customers, referred those deals to the sales reps. And, those were small deals, but as I did that, they then brought a lot more business to me because I was delivering value first, right? And so I think that that's a big one, that just no matter what you're doing is deliver massive value that goes well beyond kind of the commercial aspects. The second thing I would say, is kind of the next X factor is building trust. And, trust is thrown around a lot, but it is so critical. And I'd say the biggest transactions I've ever closed in terms of deals, be it on the investment side or selling a company or selling a product, is always comes down to trust at the end of the day. And so I think that those two things are probably the biggest.
That's very interesting, Jason. I mean, I really like the how you put it. So, I mean, I have a quick question as a follow-up question. So, you started. I mean, when Salesforce was in their beginning stages and all, right? Where along with them. So, my question is like today, when you talk about Salesforce community or Salesforce ecosystem, it's so big that people, I think, automatically have a trust that is built because they know the name that they built. So, but when you started with them in their early stages, how were you able to pull that trust for the customers about Salesforce? Did you even imagine like they are going to scale it so big? And what's your take on
I
that?
mean, it was very hard because it was a new technology. At the time, people were used to managing their sales and their CRM data on a local laptop application or a client server application. And so, we were coming in saying, hey, look, this is going to move to the internet. This is the benefits. It's going to make it easier for your remote sales teams to track deals, versus trying to tie into the server remotely. And so, again, I think it was about value, and the value equation in that time was it was dramatically less expensive. And so when Salesforce launched, I think it was like $5 a month to get started. And, we were competing against, incumbents that were like Siebel systems that were charging millions of dollars for large enterprises, right? And so we had one displacement where we displaced Siebel with Salesforce for 600 users globally. And it was really, proving the value, proving the technology, building the confidence and trust in the platform that would work for them. But then, the massive value was it was a fraction of the cost, and it actually allowed their sales teams to be much more productive than a heavyweight application that no one was actually using anyways.
Very interesting, Jason. So, do you see like how when Salesforce started and how you felt it's a pretty new technology? Do you see the similar phase right now with AI coming in and all? And do you think something like that is happening again where a big thing is
Yeah,
up?
sure. Oh, absolutely. I mean, my career makes me feel old, but if you start to have perspective because you see like these massive changes in technology, like the .coms, SaaS, mobile, social, all these things, and all of them have similar patterns. And I think what we're seeing with AI, what's interesting is if you start to, even just in the last couple of weeks on LinkedIn and online, I'm starting to see the tone change, right? So it's really gone from like early adopters who are like really excited, and also a lot of people fearful of like what's going to happen to the software industry with AI. It's going to go away and all this stuff, right? But I think now the realism is starting to set in, and people are actually starting to be like, okay, great. You know what? LLMs aren't going to be like the magic, secret sauce for everything. At the end of the day, it still comes down to business value. It still comes down to solving problems. And AI is a great tool to execute that, but it's not a panacea in and of itself. And so I'm starting to see some of that realism come in. And so it's really not about just trying to jump on the AI bandwagon, but it's more about how do you help companies adopt this stuff and really maximize the value of it on top of what's already happening, such that they can transform their businesses with this new capability.
Very interesting, Jason. So, Jason, so having been in leadership roles across the US, APAC, and beyond, right? So, what cultural or regional nuances have you learned that really shape sales effectiveness globally?
Sure. Yeah, it is a big question. I'll try to, hit it simply. But I had an office in India for a long time in Gurgaon. I actually had we had a house there and spent a ton of time there. I lived in Singapore for about 7 years. And so I never really ran business outside of the US until those experiences. And, as an expat, what I quickly learned is that you have a lot of value bringing new technology into new markets and helping them adopt. But at the same time, to be very successful, you need to actually have very local people to partner with and help you align with kind of the local needs and expectations, because the buyer patterns are different, the expectations are different, and also the commercial models are different, right? A little bit, not dramatically different, but slightly. And so what I quickly learned was that I had to have salespeople that were from the local market in each of the markets. So like I had somebody based in Thailand, I had somebody based in Japan, in Australia, and then kind of the combination of Americans and the locals, kind of bringing some new technology to the market, but also with a local flavor, and then trying to understand, okay, how do we actually sell in that market and integrate with the ecosystem of partners and influencers that are in that market. So again, it's really about just getting local and not just thinking, oh, I'm going to take the same playbook from a marketing and sales perspective and just bring that and expect that I'm going to get the same results.
Very interesting. Very, very amazing, Jason. So, coming back to what we are at right now, right? So at Launchpad, you're helping software companies unlock the growth, right? So can you walk us through how you identify which levers to pull first when you engage with a new client?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Launchpad.io is an exciting new product that we launched about 2.5 years ago. And it's really taking the powerful enterprise grade low code workflow and AI capabilities of our enterprise product for Pega that we've delivered to hundreds of the largest organizations globally, solving very complex process problems. We had software companies that were coming to us asking, we love the Pega technology, but we'd like to be able to take that and build our own products and take that to market, right? And so now what we're doing is really going out and talking to, I'd call kind of pre-AI era software companies that are, kind of having a little bit of FOMO, they're a little bit of fear in terms of, what their place is going to look like in the new AI era, and really helping those companies quickly say, look, you've got hard-won client relationships. You've built trust and credibility with those customers. You've got a deep understanding of their problems and the solution that you deliver to solve those things. But the challenge is most SaaS previously applications was basically helping to track and manage work, right? Think of CRM. It was like people had to enter data, report on the data, and so on. But the opportunity for AI and agentic workflow is really changing it such that it's moving from tracking the work to actually doing the work, right? And so that opens up a new revenue opportunity for these existing companies that have lots of clients in a specific area of expertise with BFS or insurance or healthcare or whatever it might be in regulated industries, and we can help them accelerate their AI roadmap and launch products and capabilities to make that shift to executing the work and doing the work versus just tracking the work. And so often in SaaS, we all know acquisition is hard, and expansion is actually where most of the growth comes from for a lot of the most successful SaaS companies. And so we're really focused on that side of things, is how do we provide them new capabilities and new products that help them really drive that expansion with new value that they can unlock for their customers. So long answer, but hopefully that addresses it.
No, yeah, you've definitely, I mean, I could get good insights, and I was just wondering, like, when you said that you're offering the service to those companies, so I wanted to ask, is it like focused more of product-based SaaS companies, or is it also something service-based companies also can explore further?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So absolutely, our primary focus right now is software companies, B2B software companies. I think that's where the biggest value unlock is, but we're seeing the services market transform as well. And a lot of these services organizations, and we're working with several of them, are trying to figure out how do they deliver recurring value in a scalable way. And they want to productize that and move away from just pure hourly billing and people-based consulting services, right? Be it outsourcing or whatever it might be. And so a platform like Launchpad actually allows them to do that in a recurring way. So let's say a BPO, business process outsourcer, or managed service provider, they could leverage Launchpad to quickly build repeatable workflows that can automate some of that work and help them deliver greater value and have greater impact at a lower cost, but still have kind of human in the loop, involved in making the strategic decisions and, fine-tuning the models and the application and so on. So.
Yeah, very interesting, Jason. Yeah, that because why I asked this question is because recently I was talking to one of the founders who is into a services market, and then I kind of understood like they have some communication gap or probably confusion over how this agentic era could put their business into, and all. Probably they should listen to this. I'll probably share this podcast with them.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it's again what are the constraints, right? And
Exactly.
if the constraint is people, this technology is a great way to start to be able to help deliver that. I mean, we had one example where a client, actually a law firm, built a product on Launchpad, and they were doing something for the FS industry. And essentially, they tripled the workload that their existing team could handle. So effectively growing their revenue dramatically, but not growing the number of people that they had. And so they're a law firm. They're basically in services. And so that's the kind of opportunity I think that exists.
Yes, yes. And amazing. Yeah. So, Jason, like in this process, and it's like you've worn hats as a founder, executive, and investor, right? So, which of those roles has most influenced your philosophy on sales leadership today?
I would say everything does. And I think, the challenges of entrepreneurship and sales and ultimately life, I think are the things that make you more resilient. And what you learn is, you really just have to be perseverant and really keep just executing and keep on the path of continuous improvement and learning and looking for ways to really, again, unlock and overcome obstacles. Because the obstacles change. I mean, over my career, there's never been a mode where I'm like in a rinse and repeat mode. It's always, you're always constantly learning new stuff, trying to apply new things. The markets are changing, the technology is changing. And so it's really about how do you adapt and how do you stay tuned in with the market and understand where you can, what levers of growth are the right ones to pull at the right time.
Very interesting, Jason. I think, like you said, I resonate with this process where you always need to adapt. You always have to learn something new, which keeps us active and running with the market. Not just that, but I think we should always be proactive in what is happening out there and be open to all that learning, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And the last thing I'll say on that is that I think what people don't realize is that everybody's got their own struggle. And in business, there's a lot of veneer over that stuff and people don't realize it. And so, think of founders today that they've raised millions of dollars. They're, founded before all this AI stuff. They've got, customers demanding more and investors expecting returns. Like, it's a hard place to be. Right. And so I think the more you can be an empathetic kind of leader and seller and tap into that understanding that, these aren't just people that you need to sell to, but they're actually people who are on their own kind of hero's journey or struggle, and how are you going to help them through their struggle, no matter whatever it might be. Right.
yeah, true. Absolutely, Jason. So, Jason, like you've helped companies through acquisitions and venture scaling, right? So, what's the toughest sales leadership challenge that often gets overlooked during those transitions?
In terms of leadership challenge, or tell me more, what are you looking for?
In terms of leadership challenges, sales leadership challenges.
I think it's the same things. It's most of the challenge is internal. and right in terms of just really driving and organizing yourself to go execute on the highest impact things, because the game of business is unlimited and there's an unlimited number of things you can do. And so it's really about figuring out what are the key things that are the most important to do right now and getting those things done and being ruthless with your time such that you can really make an impact and then move on to removing the next set of obstacles so you can unlock new growth.
Very nice. So, Jason, now let's probably talk a bit about the future of sales and AI, right? So yeah, you worked at the intersection of technology and sales for decades. Okay, so your experience is amazing there. Where do you see AI playing the biggest role in shaping how future sales teams learn? And
Sure. It's an interesting one. I think we're all figuring it out. And so I don't have the crystal ball, but look, we all know that the old go-to-market models are, kind of being transformed. It's getting very expensive, right? And so, I think the big thing is leverage, right? And so how do you get more leverage out of the actions and the team and the resources that you've got, and really leveraging AI to do that? And so, the obvious and easy place that people have gone is content creation, right? But we're also seeing the pendulum swing the other way, where now, there's kind of a bit of a backlash on like AI generated content, and it lacks a soul, and, it lacks, kind of a lot of the, personal touch that people can have. And so I think it's not looking at things again as a silver bullet, but it's looking at it in a way that says, okay, how do I take this tool and help me drive more productivity, but also enhance and amplify my skills and reach without relying on it as a crutch, which will actually move us backwards, right? And so I think that's one big area. The other area, there's this whole space that you guys are in, I think, which is very exciting, which is really around, kind of the AI coaching and mentoring. And I think that's fascinating because it's really, at the end of the day, it's those skills in terms of communication skills, sales skills, relationship development skills that, is hard to scale. And, understanding what's working across the hundreds of interactions that might be happening with your sales teams and clients is a big unlock, I think, to really be able to fine tune that using AI and coaching tools is another area.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, Jason. Like you said in the first one, when you said there's a lot of content that's being created in this process. So like as a marketer, when I see that, okay, this is happening with a lot of AI, but do people really consume so much of content? Is my like doubt that keeps coming to me all the time. But when I look at the second point, which you said again, when you're looking at giving them like what is that going wrong, what is that going right, it is also, I mean, it might be an indirect content, but at the end of the day, like you are able to create so much data and then fine tune it and give them to the way they require it so that they can work it out in their future, right? So that's
Yeah.
So Jason, like many leaders wrestle with how much to automate versus where to keep the human touch. So what's your framework for deciding what should be automated in sales?
What should be automated in sales? There's a lot there. So I think that again, it's about leverage, but leverage with a human touch. And, there's a couple aspects of it. So one thing is, in our space at Pega and Launchpad, we're really strong in regulated industries, and the reason for that, especially with AI, is that you need predictability. And so even using the new models, the latest models are out there, there's still hallucinations, there's still wrong information. And so I think that having your experience and knowledge to be able to make sure that you're checking what's being produced by the AI and making sure that it actually is the most up to date and accurate is important. But when you build a scalable system, you can't afford to have a 1% or 2% error rate, especially for, let's say, client onboarding or risk assessments or mortgage applications, right? You can't have an AI all of a sudden making decisions, autonomously on this stuff and potentially deciding to change the rules. And so we believe there's a lot of benefit to having structure and rules, but then using LLMs for what they're great at, which is language and interaction, right? And so when you combine the two, there's a lot of value unlocked. And so back to your question, I think there's opportunity to basically look at automation really end to end across the entire, sales and marketing, landscape, from acquisition all the way through to expansion. And so I think that it's just about, how do you find the right things? And then how do you make sure that people are in the loop to make sure there's authenticity, there's credibility, there's a personal touch to it, but also that there's predictability and accuracy. And then you also have exception handling as well, where you want to have people involved making the decisions. And typically we handle that in design time, such that at execution, you've got that repeatable model that's predictable and isn't going to give results that might be questionable.
Very interesting, Jason. Interesting. So, Jason, like deal reviews have historically been long, right? Like manually and biased. Like if AI can surface patterns and insights, how might that change the way leaders coach their teams and make decisions?
Yeah. So I think that it's at two levels. So one is as an individual contributor in sales, I think getting those insights real time is really important because it's just going to help you put in the reps and get better and better over time. And so I think that that's, a key thing. And then having those insights so that you can be more efficient and spend more time ultimately prospecting and in front of clients, right? And that's where I think the value of, people in sales is going to remain for a while is that human connection, right? It's this conversation. And so the less time I can spend as an individual contributor on meetings, deal reviews, prepping data, looking at reports, and trying to sift through information, the better, right? And so having, tools like what you folks are doing and others, where I surface that information really quickly, now I can act on it. I can get really back to my job of going out and trying to sell. At a leadership level, I think it's also, about, reducing time in meetings, and really, having everybody kind of be at a level playing field of understanding what's happening in the business. If you've got the right systems and AI insights happening, you don't have to be talking about things that are kind of baseline, and then you can really focus the interactions and the dialogue of when you get your teams together really on problem solving and figuring out where your biggest challenges are to really take things to the next level based on that, kind of AI powered data and insight.
I mean, that's true, Jason. Like even at Outdoo, that's what we do, right? Like where we are giving a lot of information and then automated coaching. A lot of our even customers and I mean the leaders keep coming back saying, "Hey, we could save a lot of time because the amount of time they had to initially spend was a lot where they couldn't review every call, and then that was the biggest challenge, which has come down drastically." But often we keep asking them, "Are you having those regular catch-ups with your team members?" Because we don't want it to automate to 100% where they should also have these regular interactions, and that human touch is always important, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, it's making this stuff automated from the conversation versus a salesperson, like back in the early days with Salesforce, back in the early 2000s, like, reps had to spend hours going back and like updating their CRM, right? And then people don't do it, and then the data's out of date and all this stuff. And so that's, I think, a great opportunity unlock that's happening today.
Yeah, true, Jason. Yeah. So Jason, looking back on your own leadership journey, like how would you have liked to use AI tools, whether for coaching, deal strategy, or role play, if they were available back then?
I mean, totally. I mean, I think it would transform things, right? In terms of, again, getting people back to, spending more time in front of clients, and making them more efficient in their time with clients. The fun thing that I've got right now is I run a startup, which is Launchpad within, $1.5 billion company. And so our luxury and kind of the challenge is that we have a very small team, very small go-to-market team. And so we're now looking at, okay, how do we build a high leverage go-to-market team that doesn't need to have hundreds of salespeople to go, deliver, a large, meaningful impact to our overall business, right? And so I think, absolutely looking at, tools like this where we can start to say, okay, if I've got one or two reps right now, and then we can start to, really hone and refine what works in sales and prospecting and outbound and deal closing. And then we can now replicate that as we onboard other members so that we can drive greater efficiency and we don't have to go hire, hundreds of salespeople. I think that's the big win. And so that's how I'm going to do it differently now than I would have, years ago.
Very, very interesting, Jason. I think what I asked, like you wanted to do it now, even like it's more like it's never late to get this resource. You can still do that. I mean, I really, Jason, I just quickly wanted to ask something interesting. So I mean, at Outdoo we are actually going to Dreamforce, which is a Salesforce biggest event that's happening in October. So I actually wanted to know your experience with Dreamforce, probably if how is it in general when you were at Salesforce, and when did they start, or probably your initial days or something around it.
Yeah, I mean, so the first Dreamforce we went to, which was the first one, was in a hotel lobby, and I think that there was probably maybe 100 or 200 people there. And so the benefit we had in those days is that we were early, so we were building relationships with everybody that was growing at the same time. So it became a great community. After doing those for 7 or 8 years or more, and then they started bringing in cruise ships, and it just started to get ridiculous how big it was. It was just overwhelming and hard to cover, right? So, I don't envy organizations trying to enter the ecosystem at the size and scale it is today. I think it's a totally different model, and so but I think it's a good ecosystem to tap into.
Very nice, Jason. Thank you for that insights, because I don't think I would have found this searching online like how initial days of it, even though it became so big.
But I think again, it comes down to like building some anchor people that are influential within the ecosystem and some partners that can help you kind of amplify your message and get connections out is a good way to start, and that comes from providing value to them, right? So maybe it's giving them attractive access to your platform for a period of time, because the way that they started that business was you get your first 5 seats free for the first year was how that product was launched. And so that's what really drove kind of the initial kind of tens of thousands of organizations that started to get on. So look at ways to kind of figure out how do you get in and how do you start to build that awareness, I guess.
Good, Jason. Thank you for the insights. So, Jason, like before we wrap up, I have some interesting rapid fire questions for you.
Sure.
Which help us. So, one sales book or resource you think every reader should revisit today?
Sure. So it's tough to pick one sales book, but I would say so. Sales Acceleration Formula by Mark Roberge is a great one. And Mark was the first sales leader for HubSpot. And so I actually had the pleasure of meeting Mark last week, and it was great, after reading his book last year. I think that from a leadership perspective also, I think the Revenue Architecture book, it's, a big, heavy, probably, 15-pound book, but it's a great one for understanding kind of SaaS evolution and, how you manage, acquisition and expansion, and gives you a framework that you could really tailor for your own business. So I think that those two are great complements to each other and very different.
Amazing, Jason. Thank you for the suggestion. So if you could automate one part of a sales leader's day instantly, what would you pick?
I'm going to fail on this question because my answer is more of not one thing, but it's actually everything. And so I think there's a huge opportunity for go-to-market orchestration with this new agentic workflow capability. And so I think it's a vision that's going to be hard to get to, but I think that it's what unlocks a new opportunity for sales leaders and teams to really get the next level of impact. So, all the way from acquisition through activation to retention and expansion, kind of orchestrated all the way through with AI agents all along, and really with imbuing it with a human touch as well. And so I think that once we figure that out and organizations figure that out, I think that there's some amazing opportunity. And I don't think it's going to be, some one single agent that you write a prompt and go, I want to start XYZ company and go build my business. It's not going to be like that. It's going to be a well-architected, well-designed, well-thought-out, structured GTM orchestration platform that ties in many different agents that are doing discrete tasks and pulling people in at the right steps to make sure that you've really got that power of combination of technology, automation, AI, and that kind of human touch and human in the loop.
Amazing, Jason. This is really beautiful. You crafted it so nicely.
Thanks.
Thank you. So, the next one. The most surprising lesson you learned while scaling sales team in Asia Pacific?
Sure. Yes, I think I touched on this a little bit earlier, and I think it's still the same thing, which is really get local, right? It's so I wasted a lot of time kind of going in and being like, okay, great, I'm coming in from the US, I'm out here, I can sell this product, I know how to sell this product, and very quickly you realize you're like, these markets are so different, and then you realize as you go from you get off a 45-minute flight, to Thailand and Indonesia and Malaysia, and you realize that every single one of these markets are actually different than each other as well. And so you really have to tailor it to those specific markets and get people that already have connections and already hooked into the local ecosystems as influencers to really help you get into, especially those bigger, attractive enterprise accounts. You need those relationships and local trust relationships to bridge that gap.
So last one, a power skill every seller should master in 2025.
So I would say it's one-to-one VIP relationship management. So I think that that is a powerful skill that every seller should have is, how do you quickly build rapport? How do you figure out how to deliver value to people, have empathy, connect with them at a deep level, and do all the things that are uniquely human? And I think doing that in a way that leverages all the tools, but then when you're in the moment of, being in front of somebody, you can build rapport and connection very fast. And so, the last quick story on this, sorry to talk so much, but, I recently, signed a big contract with a client who I had never known before. And just in the last, I'd say 6 months, from meeting that person to, demonstrating value, building connection, and going on a journey to really transform his business, got us to a point that we could, basically sign a, over $1 million deal with them. And I would say all of that was because of our ability to, build trust, deliver massive value, and really, become, kind of use the quote, fast friends. But what that means is really to build a meaningful relationship based on trust and value that becomes something strategic. And so I think there's an opportunity, if you have those skills, to do those things quickly. And it almost feels like it's at the level that could be a same relationship that maybe I had for 20 years. And so the better that AEs and sellers can be at doing that, and doing that, within a very compressed timeline, I think is a very critical thing, because it's going to take AI a long time to touch that.
Very interesting, Jason. Thank you so much for sharing your insights, your experience. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank
Honestly,
you.
it's not just about
Same
the
here.
podcast, but I really love the way you answered to the questions. I hope you also enjoyed it equally. Thank you so
It was
much.
great. Thank you so much for having me on. Yeah, and
Being
wish
part of-
you guys all the best, and hopefully we figure out how to help each other as well.
Yes, Jason. Really, that's what that's the nature. Thank you so much for being.
Take care. Thank you.